Well, hey, welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. Robert here, and I am with, my pleasure and all of your pleasure as well. We are here with Mariah Sherman. She's our next gen pastor.
It's a really high bar.
It's a really high bar. We're so honored and grateful that you are here. Man, no, I do appreciate you a lot.
Thanks.
And I'd love to talk about some of the messages that we've gotten to hear over the last couple of weeks with you. Sound good?
Yeah.
Let's dig deep. What do you think?
They weren't casual messages either. They were good.
They were good, and Brandon has gone through different portions of scripture. So 2 weeks ago, not just yesterday was Sunday, but 2 weeks ago, he went through Psalm 73. And there he talked about Asaph's psalm where he's lamenting over the questions like, why do the wicked prosper? He's looking around himself and he's seeing people that aren't people who fear God, and he's watching them as their lives seem so easy and it seems like their success is booming. It says they're amassing wealth, things like that. And he looks at his own life because, there's that question of why do the wicked prosper? If you're reading along with us in Psalm 73, that's in verse 12 where you kind of see that question come to life. But in verse 13, it goes to the implied question, which is, why aren't I prospering? What about mine? And he actually says, surely I've just been loyal and allegiant to God in vain, because I'm doing it and it's just not benefiting me.
Great makings for some sort of like a Broadway play or, some sort of tragic something. Don't you think?
Some kind of, some musical going on.
I'm thinking Wicked.
Okay.
You said Wicked and I'm just straight the Broadway play.
And now you're going for the Broadway,
I'm just ready.
Broadway Avenue. So if you don't know, Wicked is not like some crazy show or anything. It's just, it's
the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it's a spoof off of Wizard of Oz. Okay. So just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. But then Asaph kind of takes this turn, and it says that the reason why he took that turn is because he starts to spend time in God's presence. And as he spends time in God's presence, he starts to realize that there's a lot that he needs to grow in and learn in, and he needs to develop. And he starts to realize that God has actually been good to him, and that as he continues to be loyal to God, God will continue to bless him, and the blessings don't always look like what he thinks.
Yeah.
Now
like
there's
candy.
Like candy, exactly. So now there's a tie based on Psalm 73, which is something that Brandon talked about 2 weeks ago to what Brandon talked about yesterday, this last Sunday, where he went through Isaiah 30. And if you're with us, if you haven't watched the message, go back and watch it. You can go to our website or our app and watch it online. But he has these two tables, and one's filled with candy and junk food, and I might have stolen some. I don't know.
Corn.
Whatever else. Candy corn,
syrup.
Okay. Elf. Thank you so much. Christmas is coming, so it's exciting.
62 days.
What's that?
It's 62 days.
62 days. Do you actually? Is that real?
We did it this morning. We do it every morning on Alexa. We ask her how many days until Christmas.
That's unbelievable. Well, if you didn't know, I didn't know. It's 62 days until Christmas, so get ready, So he had that, and then he also had a table full of vegetables, and he kind of paralleled and used these things to illustrate how we always want these sweet blessings in our lives that are so tangibly sweet, and you eat candy and it's yum, 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 but then you go to vegetables and you take a bite out of some raw broccoli and you're like, and he spat it out a bunch of times, and it was very entertaining. But, he kind of used that as an illustration of how sometimes the things that show up in our lives that seem like they are difficult, that seem like they are maybe even like afflictions. And he pointed to that verse in Isaiah 30 that said, although the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. And he kind of talks about how sometimes that bread of adversity can be like some asparagus or some celery or something like that. But he says, and he kind of points out that ultimately it's better for us.
Yeah.
And he talks about three different reasons why. He said that difficulties, even though it's like vegetables for a moment, it can produce dependence on God. It can produce direction from God. And then it can also help you use discernment to figure out what you need to dispose of in your life, the things that you need to get rid of that are actually robbing you of God's best for you. And so in light of kind of what our pastor has gone through in the last couple of weeks with us, let's bring it home. This question, it kind of shows up in both these places, but I think it shows up in our lives a lot. It's kind of that question of, why is life hard?
Yeah.
Why is it unfair? I mean, you've probably heard it said this way: why do bad things happen to
good people?
To good people, And so, what are times in your life Mariah, where you've asked those types of questions, and what were the circumstances that surrounded them?
Never. So far, my life has been great. It's funny because just like everyone has, it happens. Life happens to everyone.
Yeah.
And I've worked with students for the past 15 years, and this question is just an absolute question every student has. Why do good things happen to bad people? And it's such a complicated question because you got to dissect it.
Yeah.
Why do good things? Okay, let's talk about the good things.
Yeah,
How do you define good things?
Good, yeah.
Good things money? Good things are they got that boyfriend they wanted and you didn't?
What's the time frame on how you define what good is?
Things?
Yes.
Like, well, it didn't come within 13 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, why do good things happen to bad people? Okay, let's talk about, or why do good things happen, or bad things happen to good people? Yeah.
Either way, same.
Like let's talk about good people. Like, do you think that some people are perfect? Does just being perfect mean that you're above pain? Like, do you think you can earn, if you're perfect enough, that you should somehow be above these things?
Yeah.
Is there really a good person? The Bible talks about in Romans that there's not one good.
None are good. No, not one. Yeah.
Of the glory of God. So it's a very complicated question, but for me, it was mostly theoretical until we decided to have a family, and it was not easy. So my husband and I decided to have a family. I was 24. We're like, all right, let's start trying. We got pregnant the first month that we tried. And we're like, of course we did. This is how life goes, right? Yeah. And 10 weeks, maybe 11 weeks into that pregnancy, that child died. And not only did she die, but the circumstances of it made me really sick. So the kind of pregnancy it is, it's digging deeper, so we'll go deep. Yeah. As I had a molar pregnancy, so the placenta turns cancerous and invades your body and kills the fetus and gives the mom cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So we were immediately rushed into the hospital to get everything removed and done. And it was just such a whirlwind, and it just left me feeling super empty. And I had to go into the doctor for weeks afterwards to get tests done. And it didn't metastasize, and I was fine. But those weeks just left me wondering, why did this happen?
You're fine physically, but there was still some emotionally, even spiritual.
Some of the darkest parts of my life. I also was having postpartum depression. I didn't know what that was. I was 24. I just thought that all the good in life was gone now. It was just so dark. And then we had another child. Next time I got pregnant, we had Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And then the next time I got pregnant, that child also died. And then I had 4 years where we couldn't get pregnant no matter what we did. And then we finally got pregnant, and that child died as well. And then we got pregnant again. Now we have Reagan. But I remember after my second daughter had died, I was just so hung up on why did this happen? I couldn't move past it. I would cry every day and ask God, why? Why did this happen? Why? And why did you do this? Yeah. Did you do this? Or do bad things just happen? And I couldn't get off of it. And I was praying one day. We went out to celebrate what would have been a birthday. Oh, man. And I had a bundle of balloons we were going to let go for her, which apparently is bad. It kills birds. Don't do that. And I was crying, literally tears straight into the grass coming so fast. And again, ask God, why did she have to die? Yeah. And the Holy Spirit said to me, I too had a child that died. But just because he died doesn't mean his life didn't have meaning.
Yeah. Powerful.
And it's exactly what my heart needed to hear. What I was crying out for was why was she even born, and why did she die, and all these things. But God never answered my why. If you notice that answer, he didn't say why.
He didn't really answer your question.
He didn't. He answered my heart. And what my heart needed was reassurance that her life had meaning and that it wasn't wasted, and that God also could use this pain in my life for great things. And he did. Reassurance
and perspective,
Completely.
And I think something that robs you of perspective a lot of times, and Brandon talks about this when he's going through Psalm 73, he pointed out that there's this danger of comparison, especially when it comes to suffering and success.
So true.
Why do I have to suffer? And I watch those people over there have it so easy. They're amassing wealth. It just seems like everything's coming so easy to them. How come 16-year-olds are getting pregnant by accident, and having healthy babies, and all those different questions that kind of come up? Were there ever any places in your story where comparison tried to compete with God's redemption of creating some moments of perspective and reassurance for you?
For sure. Well, first off, it's a lie. Like, they're not having a great time.
Yeah.
Like, there's a joke in the infertility world, like people that I work with, we always joke, how come every 16-year-old gets pregnant on prom night?
Yeah.
When like our stable 30-year-old couple can't get pregnant.
Yes, yeah.
And it gets a chuckle, but the truth is that 16-year-old isn't having a good time.
No.
She's 16 years old and she's pregnant and she's in a hard situation.
Freaking out.
So you think to yourself, they have it so good. And it's not, everything is hard, guys. Like, life is hard. There's no escaping it. There's no comparing your way out of it. There's no wrapping it in a bow. Like, it's hard. And when it was especially hard for me is when I'm pregnant with somebody and then my baby dies and theirs doesn't. And there was always inevitably that social media post.
Always.
Of
I see that.
Introducing my baby to the world, and just how painful that was. Or for that 4 years we couldn't get pregnant.
Yeah.
Seeing people that I had my first kid with announce their second pregnancy. Like, I remember seeing one of them post, and it felt like someone punched me in the chest. Like, just hurt so bad to see other people moving what I felt like forward in their lives when we were stuck in pain and death and in despair.
Now, did it create comparisons of, God, look how loyal I am being to you?
Oof.
And how about this? Like, they aren't as committed to you as I am. Did you ever have those kind of struggles?
Oh, it's so human to have that.
Yeah.
We grow up being like, well, I did my chores and I get my allowance, and that's why I get more toys than you, because I did more chores. And I was that kid.
Yeah.
I was like, well, you know how to earn more money if you want more toys. Look at my toy. I'm a good kid.
Look what I got. I earned it. I deserve it.
I earned it. I deserve it. And those things creep right into our spiritual life if we don't check them at the door.
Yeah.
Because that's not God's economy. And thank God it's not his economy. Because I hope he doesn't dish out everything I deserve.
I'm so glad his mercies are new every morning, because I needed them this morning, right?
Right. And if you really want to get what you deserve, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. I'm so glad that he's merciful and graceful.
Yeah.
But yeah, those things pop up. And I think for me, what was the most healing in the comparison trap is just realizing that I can have two feelings at the same time.
Explain that.
I know that sounds like
dive in a little bit.
And I'll tell you where I learned it.
Okay.
Daniel Tiger.
Okay.
It's a kid's show. I even have the jingle for you if you want to hear it.
So much of Mariah's theology comes from Daniel the Tiger,
Bible,
just so you know.
Daniel Tiger, Fred Rogers, mix them up.
She just, okay. True next gen.
Just being able to accept that I was in a crappy spot, and they're having one of the most beautiful moments in their life, and allowing both of those things to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're posting about their beautiful baby, and I'm having a hard time, that's my journey that I'm on. They don't need to quiet how wonderful their life is in this moment so that they don't make me feel worse about mine. I'm on a journey with God and we're going somewhere. I don't know where. We're going somewhere, and they're having a beautiful moment, and that's good. They're both true. They can both be true.
When you can celebrate in someone else's life what you're suffering from a shortcoming in your own life, I mean, that speaks to a whole lot of security in something that's beyond your circumstances. So that didn't come easily to you. What were some landmark moments along the journey where you started to, whether it was moments like you talked about where God spoke to you and gave you perspective, what were some other landmark moments where it was just meaningful for you? And how do you think that even applies to people that are listening right now, that are going through places in their life where they're tempted to stare at their suffering and then resent other people's success because of it?
I totally empathize. There were two landmark moments for me. And one of them was reading in the Old Testament about when the Israelites were scattered, the Babylonian exile. And God says to them, I want you to plant gardens. And which means very little to us. We're like, gardens are nice. But in an agricultural society, he was saying, sit here,
grow some roots,
grow some roots, literally live your life. And I will bring you out of exile when it is time. Because don't just keep being like, well, I don't want to set down roots because I'm sure this will end soon. Like suffering is a season. It's not a day.
It's good.
It's a season. And you just got to accept where you are and live life to the fullest in that season. You know, when you're in a season of grieving, living, life to the fullest might look like going outside and drinking a cup of coffee and breathing in the morning air and thanking God for that breath. And that's about all the positivity you can muster, But
that's something.
But that's put down roots and build that garden.
Yeah.
And that really, for me, when I had just one kid and I wanted multiple kids and I kept getting pregnant and it kept not happening, I was so tempted to be like, well, once we get all of our kids, then we'll start our life as a family. And having to just say, you know what, we're going to book that trip that I want to become a family vacation tradition, whether or not we have our whole family here. And just moving through that season God had put me in.
It sounds like you learned how to maximize where you're at instead of waiting for what you're hoping might come. You're able to say, there's blessings here and now. I'm not going to let what I'm hoping would come rob me of what I already have.
Yeah. Kind of what Brandon was talking about. Like there are blessings that are going to come in this suffering season.
That's right.
Like knowing what to dispose of and all those things. You will miss all of that if you're stuck on comparing what you used to have. Like, but it used to be easier, or I should be where I should go. That comparing back or forward, you'll miss everything that you're supposed to be. You could be getting in this season, and God will let you do it if you want to. Yeah. Or you could turn your hands up and say, I have these ashes. What do you want to teach me with them?
It's good. So it's easy when you're in the middle of a situation. I mean, what's so obvious, the most obvious thing to stare at is the disadvantages that you're facing.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the advantages that it seems like other people might have, which are oftentimes deceptions, they're lies.
Sometimes they're real.
Or half-truths, or sometimes they're real.
I would like to have all that money.
Yeah,
I wouldn't complain.
Your car actually runs. That's amazing. Okay.
Who would take that?
Mine, I have to connect wires and blow on it just right to get it to start. But whatever. No, when you look at whatever you're going through, the disadvantages seem so clear.
Yeah.
But do you see places in your life where the things that you've endured, it's actually created blessings, made you stronger? Let's even be bold enough to call them advantages in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say one thing. The go-to for people when they're suffering is to say, this is okay because someday you'll get to guide someone through the same suffering, which I think is really sweet.
It's biblical in all ways, right?
But for me, I'm just like, cool. So God kicked me in the knee so that I could help the next person he's going to kick in the knee. What if maybe God should just stop kicking people in the knee? And I think that there is a blessing. Through our infertility and miscarriage journey, have gotten to walk so many women through the same. Like I've gotten to go to their homes when they're miscarrying and help them through that experience. And this beautiful ministry I never would have had.
So you're saying it's real.
And it's real. There's an element of it that's real, but I think it's easy to be like, well, that's why it happened and I'll move on, because there's so much else God wants to do through you in the process.
Okay.
It's not just so that you can have a terrible story too, and we can all have a terrible story club. Like not only did I have the miscarriages, but I had postpartum depression after each miscarriage that I had to be actually treated for. And part of that depression, if you've ever been depressed, you will understand, you just feel like you are on low power mode. Like everything is exhausting. Like I remember one moment waking up when I was in the middle of that depression and needing to go to work and having this conversation with myself of like, you will get up and get ready for work, and like getting out of bed and like brushing my hair and brushing my teeth and just silently crying the whole time because I just didn't want to have to get up and face the day, and just brushing my teeth and crying. And like those were really, really hard seasons for me.
Yeah.
But as a type A personality, I learned so much in those seasons. The first and second time I had postpartum depression, I learned nothing. Because I spent the entire time fighting it, being like, you're better than this. You stop whining, and just trying to like smush it down. And the third time I went through it, I just really turned myself over to the Lord.
Yeah.
And like felt the deep loss. I took some time off of work. When the time was ready, I came back to work and gave it my best, but I still wasn't 100%. So I found times to push myself to give it my all, but times to just sit and grieve like I'd never done before. And God grew in me a depth and maturity I had never had before. And my dependence in love for him grew. And I experienced mercy and love like I had never experienced before in this season.
Now, what did that look like to experience mercy and love like you'd never had before?
I didn't produce as much. Like I wasn't very helpful. Like I'm used to getting home from work and I put down my bags, I get the kids settled, I start making dinner, I do the dishes, and I don't stop until I go to bed. When you're in a depression like that, you just can't. You literally don't have the energy. Like I had to learn how to get home and just let everything be a mess, to go upstairs and read a book for a little bit and kind of gain enough energy to go back and interact with, make dinner. And that was low energy mode for me, but that's also just pure health. And I just wasn't willing to accept that maybe I needed to not, it's okay to not produce and be killing it all the time.
That's not what makes Mariah.
No, and that my family will continue to love me.
Yeah.
And that God continued to love me the same. Maybe even more, because in my weakness, I was more open to accept. I was more seen because I was being more real, because I didn't have the energy to cover up anymore. And so I got to experience love like I'd never known before. But I didn't get that the first two times because I just tried to mask better.
I think a lot of us are where you were at the first two times. I'm convicted right now. I'm like, oh man, oftentimes I think we'll avoid our suffering, we'll avoid our hurt, our pain by distracting ourselves with other things. It sounds like you actually spent some time sitting in your suffering and trying to listen to the Lord and let him be the source of your comfort, the source of even your production and what you would be productive in. Man, I'm challenged. I'm convicted on a personal level. I don't know if you're listening and you are too.
There was a pond by my house. I would ride my bike to the pond and I would sit there and I would read Isaiah 40, which is basically Isaiah being like, the world's terrible. And I'm like, it is terrible. And I would just pray and I'd say to God, here I am and I'm a mess and I don't know what to do. And I would just sit there. And then I would go home and I would do the dishes and I would interact with my family and I would do all those things that whatever energy I had to give, I would give as an offering. But I would take that time to just be a mess.
Yeah. And the truth is that life is challenging. Life is hard.
It is.
And it has all those different issues and difficulties that come up.
And it's also beautiful.
But God uses those things and redeems those things. That's the whole message.
They're both true, guys. You can have two feelings at the same time.
Thank you, Daniel the Tiger.
It can be the worst time in your life and it can be one of the deepest, most beautiful if you turn it over to the Lord and you don't try to hold on to it on your own.
It sounds like you spent some time in the Lord's presence.
You gotta.
And because of that, you came out of there with advantages, with blessings, with perspective, with strength, with grit, with perseverance, with all those types of things.
Yeah.
And because of it, God has used you and continues to use you, but he also continues to be part of your journey where you're still healing from things.
Yep.
Because you're still going to face difficulties. Now, when you look back on the things that you've grown through, the situations that you've had to endure, but then you see the way that God has redeemed those things, it's given you a new perspective. Do you carry that perspective when you face new challenges? And if you do, does it mean that all of a sudden, whenever difficulties come, it's like, no problem, been here, done that. I already know the end of the story means that God is good and that everything's going to work out all peachy. So now, even though life is difficult, I can be super smiley, at church and just have a ball and just show everyone how joyful I am. Like, what does that look like for you now when you face challenges?
Two feelings at the same time.
Okay.
Right? When that next challenge comes, I'm friends with it now. I'm not afraid of loss anymore. Where I was afraid and trying to deny that it was even happening because I didn't know how to deal with it.
Oh man, we gotta stop there. You're friends with the difficulty now.
Yeah.
You're not afraid anymore.
Yeah, because I know that it's going to be really, really hard, like gut-wrenchingly hard. Like you want to throw up hard, but I know that God is in it. And I know what it means to walk together through what's hard because I've given myself to it and I've watched him prove himself faithful. Does that mean that you spend less time crying your eyes out? No, it does not. It does not. But the fear isn't there. Like my last miscarriage, I was able to just focus on the loss. I wasn't so focused on, should I even be feeling these feelings? And is God going to show up and is he even good? Like I just was able to take God's hand and walk into the mire.
Wow. Man, I think that we have maybe missed what the best thing is for us so often because we're looking at circumstances and stuff, success, as that's what makes a person prosperous. And you're looking at situations and saying, when difficulties happen, I actually say, hello, friend, because I know that God is in the middle of that. And prosperity for you looks like the presence of Jesus.
It does now. It does now because of those circumstances. And I know, like, when the Bible talks about life to come, it's a place with no tears. Yeah. Like, that is not the story that God wants for us. But in the brokenness of this life that we have to live, he's so present if we're willing to stop and accept what's actually happening and not just trying to shove it down, but just experience his presence.
So for people that are listening right now, that are asking all those questions that we kind of talked about in the beginning of our time today. Yeah. What is one thing that you would encourage them to, as a mom, as a wife, as a pastor, as a Christian? How would you encourage them right now in some of those things that they're facing, the questions that they're asking of where is this coming from and why is this happening and why isn't it happening to them and why can't my life look more like theirs? What would you say to them if you had one closing remark?
Closing remark. I think I would probably say, earlier you asked me landmark moments. I said I had two. I talked about one. And my second would be, I remember taking a pregnancy test, hoping to be pregnant. Like we're going on 3.5 years now, right? I started buying my pregnancy tests at the dollar store because it just was too much money to buy them at CVS because of how often I was taking them. I was waiting to get to wait 3 minutes. And I just remember the Lord speaking to me and saying, no matter what this test says or doesn't say, your identity as my daughter and a servant of God will not change. And I think that's the advice that I would give is that we need to spend time building into our identity as a servant of God and his beloved child. Defining it. Because that will never change. Like if you get in a car accident and you're quadriplegic, you're still a servant of God and you're going to do whatever he calls you to do next. Absolutely. And beauty will come out of that. If you lose your child and you're no longer a parent, that identity shift is huge, but your identity as God's child and a servant of God will never change. Yeah. They have a lot of money and you don't. They get in that college and you don't. Your foundation is unshakable. And the rest of the world is slipping on ice. And so you need to focus on what your identity is. And through that, you can make it through any storm. Wow. Well, so good. and also so difficult. Yeah. I mean, I wish I could have just read someone else's blog about this stuff instead of having to actually live it myself. So lucky you get to just listen to this podcast. And no, I'm just joking. That should fix you all. There you go. No, thank you, Mariah, seriously, for your maturity and also your authenticity to be willing to walk and represent where you are in the journey. Thank you for not pretending like you are at the finishing line all the time and everything's peachy. Ooh, but also sharing with us, God has done some incredible things in your life
And I want you to know that God does incredible things through your life.
Well, thank you.
Man, I'm challenged right now. Like I'm ministered to right now.
You know, I will drop one thing, and I haven't told anybody yet, but this is digging deeper, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I have so many miscarriages is because I have a genetic issue. And should we even get to the point where a child is born alive, statistically, that's unlikely. But if it happens, there's a 50% chance they'll inherit what I have.
Wow.
And then when that child grows up, they'll have all the same challenges that I had. And as a mom, that is just a horrible thing to have to deal with. And when Kennedy was born, we had her tested, and she did not inherit my genetic disorder.
Wow.
And when Reagan was born, we sent off her stuff for testing, and it took 4 weeks to come back. And she also did not inherit my genetic disorder. And it was one of the greatest reliefs of my life to know she won't have to do that.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm sure there'll be other challenges in those girls' lives, and I pray I can walk through them in that time. But like, what a beautiful gift through all the pain that it's an extravagant gift.
You're still pointing at the gifts
from our Lord,
pointing at the grace, still seeing God's goodness.
Oh yeah.
Even when it's hard. And so if you're listening to this, I encourage you, do the same too. Look for God's grace and goodness.
And watch Daniel Tiger.
And watch Daniel the Tiger.
If you don't have kids, just watch Daniel Tiger.
Yeah. You'll start singing songs.
Fred Rogers.
Yeah, all those kind of things. No, thank you for joining us on Digging Deeper. And I know that this was a blessing for you. I know it was beneficial for you. I'm confident of that. And we will see you next time.